What is up, fam? It's your boy Paul P. Henny, and welcome to the One Day at a Time podcast. That's right, we are coming at you every week. As a matter of fact, every Monday. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a rating wherever you get your podcast. And fam, do me a favor and share because the content that I'm sharing with you might just be able to benefit somebody else. You never know. You never know. All right, fam. So today the thought is centered around this topic that I think a lot of us deal with. And that topic is simply this: unfinished business. That's right, unfinished business. Maybe not you, and maybe as you listen to this, you're thinking about friends. Maybe you're in a place where you finished quite a few projects, but you have friends that you see that they have trouble finishing things. Or maybe you're that person that you have some goals, that you have some things that you've been wanting to do for a long time, and quite honestly, it's just simply been sitting on the shelf. So today, I really want to talk about this area of unfinished business. So I want to actually start with a question, okay? What is an area of your life where you have unfinished business? I'm going to ask that question again because I want to give us a chance to perhaps ponder this question. What is an area of your life, fam, where you have some unfinished business? So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to share from two different perspectives, from two different areas of my life, two different projects that I had to complete. One is we're going to talk about how I started something and I had trouble finishing. And then we're going to talk about another thing, quite honestly, is this podcast right here, where I actually had trouble starting. Okay, so let's start with the first one, and that's my book, Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within. Now, here's the thing, fam. So some of y'all may have heard the story about how I actually started that book, okay? And I go into detail in a couple of my prior episodes. One, Turn Your Obstacle into Opportunity. And the other episode was Evicting Frustration to Make Room for Your Purpose. Now, in both of those episodes, I talk about how I started the process of writing that book. Now, here's the thing, fam. Yes, I was out of work when I started, and I started in April of 2017. But here's the thing, fam. I was out of work when I started. So even though I was looking for a job, and my wife and I, we had just had our third son, and it was a beautiful time as a family that we were able to spend together. The reality is, a brother needed to bring in some income for the family. So I finally ended up getting a job, and I got a job 2 months later, June 5th, 2017. So April 5th, 2017 is when I started. June 5th, 2017 is when I got that job. So I had about 2 months there to write, and fam, it was a beautiful time, and I was writing one day at a time, quite honestly, one night at a time, because I wrote mostly between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. But here's the thing. I had only finished about 2/3 of the first draft by the time I started that job. And while that job was a blessing, Lord knows it was a blessing, the reality is that job actually, it kind of took away some of the time that I had to write. You see, the reality is that when I got that job, I literally had to rearrange my schedule. The times where I was writing, no longer was I able to use that time because I had to get rest because I had to go to work the next day. So what ended up happening was that book sat on the shelf for a little while. Was it a gifting? Yes. Was it a calling? Yes. But what ended up happening, fam, is that book sat on the shelf collecting dust. Because the normal rhythm that I had when it came to writing 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. on a Monday through Friday or whatever the case was, I had a job. I had to make sure that I got the proper amount of rest so that I could be effective in my job, in this new job, in this new sales career. So what I ended up having to do was, after a while, I say, okay, I have to figure out a way to finish this job, right? I have to figure out a way to finish this job, to finish this project, to finish something that I believe was a calling, to finish something that I believe was a part of my purpose. Have you been there? Have you been there? Have you been there where you say, you know what, I've started something and I feel like I've made a good amount of progress, but now my life circumstances have changed. And fam, quite honestly, sometimes we get there and it's like, okay, what's the next step to finishing? What I had to do was rearrange my schedule in order to for me to have a process that was more conducive to my new life, to my new life pattern. I was still married. My wife and I still had 3 sons. Only thing is, I had a job. So what did I do? Quite honestly, it might seem simple to you, but for me, it was a challenge at the time. I simply started writing on the weekends. So some Friday nights or Saturday nights, I would take the time to write. Now, the reality is, when I first started out, I'll be honest, I was tired on Friday night, and I'm just trying to gather my thoughts from the prior week. I'm trying to gather my thoughts, trying to gather myself from a sales week. I'm learning a new job. I'm learning a new career. I'm in a completely new field where I've never been before. So a lot of times on the weekends, I simply just wanted to recalibrate. But after a while, I had to remember that I had this project that was a calling, that was a part of my purpose, sitting on the shelf. And I wasn't going to have the impact that I believe that God wanted me to have by leaving that project sitting on the shelf. So, fam, once again, what did I do? I simply adjusted my schedule. Did I still spend time with my family on Fridays and Saturdays? I sure did. But those nights when my boys would go to sleep, I would sit, whether it was in that rocking chair in our bedroom, or we had a little spot in our living room by that time, in our little family room, and I would sit there and I would write. In December of that year, fam, I was finished the first draft of my book, Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within. And you know, fam, it was a beautiful feeling. And I went through a process, and a couple of years later, I felt like it was the right time for me to, go ahead and publish that book. But the reality is, it sat on the shelf for a while unfinished. It was unfinished. And the impact that book has been able to have, fam, I think about, what if I would have left it on the shelf? What if I would have continued to be so wrapped up in my work career that I never finished the job? I think about, the student who actually wrote her own a book report to me and told me how much the stories within the book meant to her. I think about the 80-year-old man who read my book. And quite honestly, when I wrote the book, I was thinking about young adults at the time. But the reality is, there's a mentor aspect to the book. There's a mentorship aspect to the book. And there was an 80-year-old man who not read my book not only once, but he read it twice. And I remember that Saturday, he called me and told me how he said, Paul, I just sat down and read your book again. And I was just thinking about, who can I mentor? Who's out there that I could potentially lend some of this knowledge, lend some of this wisdom to, that I gained over the years? Who can I lend some of this wisdom to? And fam, he told me that he began to think about that from simply reading my book. What if I had never finished the project? You see, I had unfinished business, and I had to figure out a way, figure out a path, figure out a strategy to finish the business, right? I had to figure out a strategy to finish the business. So what did I do? Once again, I rearranged my schedule in a way that made sense for me so that I could finish the job. The second thing, this podcast right here, that where you're either watching me, you're listening. I can't tell you, fam, how long I've wanted to do something like this. You see, when said book, Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within, when it came out, I was on probably about 25 to 30 different podcasts. I was on quite a few podcasts, and my wife, my lovely wife, Kara, kept encouraging me, Paul, you probably need to start your own podcast. Now, she had been saying this for years. So last year at the time of recording, last year was 2024, I finally bought some podcast equipment. And fam, your boy was excited. I was excited. It was almost like Christmas morning, right? So I had this box where I had this mixer, right? I had this. I had my wife is a photographer, so I was thinking we can use her cameras. I had this microphone that we could use, and fam, we about to do this, right? We about to do it. And then the more I looked at the equipment, the more frustrated I got, the more overwhelmed I got. Because I realized something that's pretty simple. I had no clue how to use this equipment. I had no clue. So I would look at this equipment, I would take it out and I was okay, especially that mixer. I had no clue how to use it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, fam, I still don't know how to use it because I'm not using it. Okay. Not saying that I won't use it down the road, but as of right now, I'm not using it, and I'll get to why here in a second. The reality is, fam, I was overwhelmed with the technology. Okay, I was overwhelmed with technology, and I can't tell you how many creators out there got YouTube views from me, right? And I'm sitting up there looking at their videos, trying to figure out how to piece this all together. And I'm like, they make it seem so simple, but I got no clue what I am doing. And then I remember watching one guy. He said, man, all you need is your phone. All you need is your phone. And I'm like, well, I got a phone. No, but it can't be that simple. It can't be that simple. And he said, no, all you need is a phone. He said something. He said, the phone that you have today is better than the camera I started with. And I was faced with a choice, fam. I could either talk about what I didn't understand, or I could choose to listen and perhaps believe this guy who had years in the game, years in this field. So eventually I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to listen to him. After a while, a friend of mine actually asked me to be a guest on his podcast. Now, fam, what you got to realize is by this time, I had my equipment literally for over a year. For over a year, this podcast equipment, the mixer, the microphone, all of this stuff sat there collecting dust. Sat there just collecting dust. Every once in a while I would look at it, and quite honestly, there would be times I would look at it and I would find myself simply, quite honestly, just being frustrated with myself because I'm like, I bought it. I thought I was doing the right thing. As a matter of fact, I remember taking pictures of all the equipment, sending it to my brothers, sending it to my friends and say, hey, we about to do this. And then a year later, nothing was done. Nothing was done. But then my friend Matt, he asked me to be a guest on his podcast for school leaders. I think it's called Hot Conversations or Hot Topics with School Leaders. And I said, sure, I will join you. Another friend of mine said, Paul, I think this is your opportunity right here. What he encouraged me to do, he said, why don't you have your podcast equipment, your podcast setup ready so that by the time you record that podcast with your friend, you'll be ready to start your own. Maybe you could even have a podcast episode ready by that time so that you can make reference to it when you're a guest on his podcast. You see, I was faced with a choice. I could either say, that sounds nice, but I'm not sure because I don't know how to use this equipment. Or I could listen to him. And fam, I chose to listen to him. So actually for Father's Day, I said, I asked my wife is very creative. And I said, can you just help me? Can you just help me as a Father's Day gift, if you will? I don't want you to buy anything for me, anything along those lines, but can you just help me get this room set up? Because you're a bit more gifted in this area than I am, right? She helped me to get this set up. I joined him for his podcast. And fam, do you know that by the time his podcast episode featuring me as a guest came out, do you know that I had 10 episodes, actually more than 10 episodes recorded and released? You see, what happened was I had to figure out a way to simplify it. And what ended up happening as well is I had a goal with a deadline. I simplified my process and I had a goal with a deadline. What am I recording on right now? I ended up listening to the other guy. I'm recording on my phone, right? And I also do some speaking. So I bought a lapel microphone just to help me with speaking engagements. And my wife and I said, hey, why don't we just use this same lapel microphone to help me to record this podcast to help with the audio? And that's what I did. So literally, my phone and a simple lapel microphone helped me to get this podcast that you're listening to, this podcast that you're watching. It helped me to get up and going. I simplified the process and I had a goal with a deadline. So fam, as we wrap up today, what I want you to think about are ways that you can get things off of the shelf. The ways that you can finish some of that business that you're called to, because there's certain things that you're called to. There's certain things that you are purposed to do that will have an impact on other people. It may not be a book. It may not be a podcast. Maybe there's something that you've been working on in the technical field that will help a lot of different people. You know, maybe you're a blogger, maybe you're a writer, and there's so many things within you that you like, you know what? I know this needs to be out there to encourage somebody, whether you're encouraging people in the sports industry, you're encouraging business leaders, you're encouraging mothers, you're encouraging fathers, whatever that field is, and maybe you just haven't gotten that thing off of the shelf. And fam, my encouragement to you today is to take that rag and dust it off. Dust it off, because there's somebody out there that needs your gifting. And who is your gifting serving by sitting on that shelf? So I'm going to leave you with these 3 things. Number 1, figure out your next achievable step. Okay? And then set a goal with a deadline and then do it. So figure out your next achievable step, set a goal with a deadline, and then do it. Make sure that simple step gets done. Number 2, find some accountability. Who is in your life that will hold you accountable, that will support your goal? Maybe it's a friend, okay? Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's somebody that you've been supporting for quite some time, that you've been encouraging, and you know what? You say, hey, how about we get in this thing together? I have a couple of friends. We catch up on a weekly basis. We just check in. I'll check in with how they're doing with their business or whatever they're working on. They'll check in with me. Hey, Paul, how's that podcast coming along? We check in together, and that helps to keep us going. It helps to keep us motivated, right? It helps us to stay on track. For me, I check in with my wife. What better partner than my spouse, right? What better partner to have than my spouse, my wife who I love, my wife who loves me. But we're not just in this for the love and for our children. We're in it to support each other, because I believe that I'm also here to help support her in her calling, and she's here to help support me in my calling. We're working together. So number 2, identify that support and be there for each other, fam. Be there for each other. And number 3, I want you to remember, what have you already accomplished? What have you already taken off the shelf and finished? I'm here to remind you today that you have already accomplished something. You have already finished a project, whether it's a project or whether you finished a goal. You've accomplished something, and it's up to you to remember. Okay? Whether it's high school, you finished college, you finished something. You finished the training for the job that you're currently in right now. You finished it. You accomplished it. So what you need to do, or what I'm encouraging you to do, is to remember what you have already done and allow what you have done to encourage you to continue with that thing, that unfinished business that may be sitting on the shelf. Because that unfinished business is meant to serve somebody. It's meant to serve somebody. Whether it's the world at large or whether it's simply your family, that unfinished business has a purpose. That unfinished business has a purpose. Fam, I want to read a Bible verse as we close today, just to seal this with a bit of encouragement. And that's Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 8. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and a patient spirit is better than a proud spirit. The end of a matter, fam, is better than its beginning. If you've already started, great, and I'm proud of you for starting. But remember, we're here to finish. We're here to finish. And how are we going to do it, fam? We're going to continue to learn together. We're going to continue to grow together. And we are going to continue to get our rags, dust those things off on our shelves, and we're going to finish these projects. We're going to finish our business one day at a time. You got this.